Hello and welcome to episode 83 of the Chills of Will podcast. This is a pleasure for me. I get to talk with a friend and former colleague of sorts back in the LA days. We'll talk about that in a second. Here's a little bit about Larry Strauss, a former subway graffiti artist, stand-up comic, television writer, ghostwriter, and corporate poet. Larry Strauss writes the kind of fiction he likes to read: funny, surprising, insightful, and poignant. He teaches high school English and coaches basketball in South Central LA, Los Angeles, and tries to recruit kids out of materialism, violence, and despair and into the world of ideas. Strauss grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, then attended high school and college in Los Angeles. He wrote for television in his 20s, including 3 episodes of the first season of Transformers. Then ghost wrote and co-authored books with a doctor, nutritionist, financial planner, and 2 psychologists. He also wrote The Magic Man, a biography of Magic Johnson for the mid-grade audience. His first 3 novels, Fake Out, One Man, One Vote, and Unfinished Business, were published by Holloway House Books, now a subsidiary of Kennsington. His 4th novel, Now's the Time, was published by Kearney Street Books. Strauss lives in Los Angeles with his wife Eleanor and their son. See more about him at Larry Strauss, all one word, .net, larrystrauss.net. Larry, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
Great. It's great to be with you. Thanks.
Awesome. We were just waxing poetic about the old days when we used to be coaches and coaches against each other in a way,
Yeah.
and in the LA area.
Bitter rivals.
Bitter rivals, right? This wasn't big time, Division
No.
One, small schools. But man, you guys had some really good teams. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. Well, you did too, as I recall.
It's awesome to have you on, and I think I maybe knew at the time a little bit about your writing prowess, but I'm very impressed, to say the least. You have the East Coast, West Coast upbringing. Talk a little bit about growing up in New York, and especially your relationship with words.
Yeah, I feel very blessed actually to have grown up in New York City. Although at the time, it was not always easy. My parents were of a generation where you just let kids go when they were old enough to go outside, and I was riding the subways and buses when I was 8, 9 years old, and getting mugged for my lunch money and getting chased and threatened and beaten up and all that stuff. And and eventually I sort of adapted myself to the environment, and kind of came to love it and came to appreciate, I think, the sort of the grimness, the real people who I miss seeing as much when I go back there now. It's it's a very different city.
Yeah.
But for me, language has always been a special thing. I don't know. I mean, I think my father loved words. My father wrote song lyrics, and I think also, maybe having a developmentally disabled brother who didn't speak until he was like 5 or 6 years old. And I just remember the magic of his first words, and how special that was, that he could communicate with us. I actually wrote a story about it. It was published years ago in the in-flight magazine of the now defunct TWA Airlines.
Oh, wow.
Airlines. Yeah, it was a story about a Thanksgiving where he let the cats out of the back of the house, and almost gave my aunt a heart attack. My aunt had a cat phobia. My father did not tell her we had cats, and we hid them in the back. Anyway, and seeing her, she became in a catatonic state, and it was almost like he could relate to her at that moment. Wow. He understood her better because she was more like him, when he would get into the autistic trance. And that was when he said his first words.
Wow. Yeah, there are so many well, there are, two or three that I can think of from the book, the most recent, which we'll talk about, where there is that connection between, let's say, Trudy and Davy. And so that's really interesting. You talk about that connection that you saw between your brother and your
Oh,
aunt.
right, right. Very similar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What were you reading when you were a kid?
I wasn't much of a reader when I was a kid. I remember, I mean, I can tell you the two books I read
Hmm.
when I was a young man. I read I mean, I sort of read Black Boy for school. It was the only book I read for school. But
Ah.
my father had to kind of sit with me for a lot of that. But I read a memoir by a guy named Lefty. It was Lefty Barretto or something. It was just a story about a guy's hard life growing up in East Harlem.
Hmm.
And I read Foul, the autobiography of Connie Hawkins. No, actually,
Okay.
or I don't think it was an autobiography. I think it was just a biography of him. I don't
Uh-huh.
think he wrote it. And it just really captivated me, those two stories. But otherwise, I didn't really get into reading until I started getting into writing. I kind of
Mm.
did it backwards.
Hmm.
I wanted so much to say something, and my first efforts were so raw and
Mm.
unreadable that that people, teachers, and other adults just said, you seem to have some talent for this, but like, you have to read. You have to become a literate person. You can't just, put words on paper. I mean, you're good at it, but you got to read. So that's when I started reading.
Hmm.
When I was actually much older when I came
Huh.
to it.
What what was the eureka moment or eureka moments when you were like, okay, I can really I've put it together. Not that not that you were a New York Times bestseller with the first thing you put down, but where was it like where people were like, "Whoa," and you realized like this is literature.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I don't probably. I mean, I probably just getting any validation at all as a you know as an intellect. I mean,
Mhm.
I was always a terrible student in school,
Mm.
and so what I do remember was that I sold the movie rights to my first novel, Fake Out, and
What?
and yeah, and for a lot of money too. Back then, they actually paid
Uh-huh.
serious advances. It was like six-figure advance when it hadn't been published yet,
Woo.
and I remember thinking like that the world had validated
Hmm.
what I'd written. That Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was attached as a producer, although
Uh-huh.
it never got made. It never happened. But
Uh-huh.
it's like I think I'm actually a writer now. I think
Wow.
I actually can do this. Um, and then of course I had to have the humbling experience of writing. I think at that point the next three books I wrote, all unpublished, were terrible because I didn't have the perspective on that
Hmm.
and then I started thinking that that I didn't that everything I wrote was great because I
Hmm.
was I was very young though when
Yeah.
that happened. And
Yeah.
it's a real hazard to
Mhm.
you see it in people. Success can be very tricky, if you're young, if you
Mhm.
haven't really worked, if you haven't really worked
Mm.
for it. I mean, not, but if you haven't had enough, of the heartbreak and
Sure.
frustration and
Sure.
rejection.
Sure. Well, I think Kareem was probably saying like, "Oh, it can't get any better than I was when I was in Airplane, the movie Airplane." So, you know, I'm sorry I can't get this one made, but
Yeah.
oh man, I've heard just through like college professors and other kind of more literary writers for film. Well, just Hollywood in general is very fickle. Is that pretty safe to say?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Well, that the project was bought by Peter Guber, who at the time
Mm,
was the head of TriStar, and
mm,
shortly after they bought it, he got promoted up to head of Sony Entertainment, leaving a new guy. I think it was Frank Rich, came in
okay.
and said, basically. I don't like any of these projects,
Uh-huh.
and it sort of got moved from like being a hot property there,
Yeah.
something they really wanted to make, to like, we'll see.
Sure.
And then, it just didn't get the attention to get made.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very fickle, and it's a lot of it is just driven by people's own taste, what people like.
Mm-hmm.
People like something and they want to make it.
Very subjective. Yeah.
And then there's just a lot of fear too of
Mm.
making a mistake.
Sure. What I mean, is it basketball related?
Yeah, it was about a college basketball coach looking for a
Okay.
missing player who
Okay.
to complete his team. And so it becomes about it becomes about all the corruptions and immorality
Uh-huh.
of college basketball. It would probably be dated today.
Sure.
At the time, though, I thought it was probably even a little ahead of its time
Yeah.
at the time. And I think also there was a movie called Blue Chip, and that probably kind of with, I think Shaquille O'Neal was in it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that excuse me, a very young Shaquille. That movie probably knocked us down a little bit,
Sure.
because it was a little similar.
Yeah, I
Similar.
was gonna ask if the coach from your book was more like Nick Nolte, Blue Chips, or more like Ben Affleck in that I don't know if you've seen that recent one where he plays a basketball coach.
Yeah,
I
no,
can't
I
think of the
haven't
name.
seen that. Yeah, he's more of a hot, like a hothead, but with a
Okay.
heart.
Sure.
A little bit of heart, and and he kind of learns. And in the end, it's probably a little romantic. He actually makes the right decision with the guy. Like he makes the moral choice at the end.
Yeah.
Which is maybe I don't know, maybe a little fun.
Transformers. Thank you for providing that. I watched some when I was a kid. I wonder if they were your episodes. You said it was literally the first 3 episodes of the show.
No. It was just 3 the first season. The first season, including one that got used. They made a movie out of it was a 3 or 4 part episode at the end of the first season that they released as a movie, and mine was
cool,
where the Decepticons were gonna once and for all just like destroy the world and harness the energy. I remember being in a meeting with the producers and saying to them, well, like, how do you, because the premise was they're going to cause tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes. They're going to and they're going to harness the energy. And I said, do you mind my asking, like, how do you harness the energy of an earthquake? And the guy looks at me like, what's wrong with you?
Stop asking too many
questions. Our average age watching this is 8 years old. They don't, you take a bleeping tube and you put it in the bleeping ground and the energy comes out of it. Like, you don't have to explain the science of it. Just there you go. Just show them it's happening.
There you go. Oh man. I wonder, did that stretch your writing skills? I mean, I assume that's very formulaic, or not necessarily.
Yeah, in its own way. Yeah. I mean, the stretch is just writing for a different medium. I think it's always good to flex the muscles and figure that out. Like there's there are things you can do with animation that you can't, that are very expensive to do. Live action.
Yeah.
You can show the world blowing up if you wanted to. On the other hand, you get your script back with notes like, with the rain is crossed out, or it's a exterior whatever night, and they're like, no, night is very expensive to animate. It's like rain and night, like stay away from that.
Okay. Oh man.
But you could have a tsunami doesn't cost us any more than I guess tsunami's not rain. You can do waves. The little raindrops apparently were. It's probably not even true anymore.
Okay.
The computers probably solved all that.
Sure.
But back then in the 80s, it was there were, I think, more limitations on what you could animate.
Speaking of limitations, I wonder where the limitations came, like from when you started teaching, kind of overlapping with your writing, the amount of time you had to write.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it never, I don't have to tell you, the teaching job, you could spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Could still be more you could do for the kids. You have to protect your time with the other stuff, the bureaucratic stuff, the BS.
Sure.
But right now I've got college recommendations to write. I've got college essays to give feedback on. I have a ton of stuff, and then I'm teaching creative writing.
Oh, nice.
And I have a lot of enthusiastic students. They want to send me their work. Oh, I wrote a new thing, and
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to get them to trust each other, but
Sure.
they know. They're like, no, Strauss. You know stuff we don't like. I want to see what you say.
Yeah.
And so that's a tough one. But
we earn our summers, right?
Yeah, for sure. But that's a tough one. The time is up. I like to think of, I forget which writer said it. That you do your best writing when you're not actually writing. That may just be a rationalization.
Right.
But, the thinking, the processing of story, I mean, sometimes though you have to just sit down. You got to bang it out. But that, I think it was the guy who wrote a separate piece, John Knowles. He didn't say that, but he said he just had to show up a certain amount a day, and it's like the story was there. It was working itself out. He just had to show up. Sure. And report it. It's like a reporter, almost like a court reporter. Just report on what's going on in the imagination. And I think that's true, though. I think when there's too much involvement in the work, when you're immersed in a job like teaching, I'm not sure how much we're able to process stories unconsciously while that's going on. It's as opposed to it's like sometimes when I hit a point in a story where I'm just not, I know there's a problem, and my first instinct, of course, is always to ignore it.
Right.
And but I'm smart enough now to know that's just dumb. Like, got to work on it. Just like when you're coaching and your players all want to dribble with their strong hand, and you go, work on your other hand, because the good defender is going to expose that weakness. Work on your weaknesses, not your strength. But if I hit a point, if I hit something and I know this isn't working, I'll go outside and I'll shoot baskets, or I'll cut boxes, all the Amazon boxes with up and try to fit them in the trash. I'll do something like that, some kind of sort of mindless work, and then I can really process it and and get it to a point where I can come back and I mean, but I ride my bike around the neighborhood every morning before I go to work, and I always come back in. I'm rushing to get out the house, but I've got to write down 3 different things that occurred to me about my story, either problems I've realized or ideas I have for something. So in that sense, there is a lot of writing does go on when we're not writing, or can. But you gotta have the time to do the reporting part and the editing. The editing is just such a massive, the revising, the testing every sentence, testing every word. That is a very very long process. And I'm actually I think one of the ways I was able to even become a writer was that I was stupidly optimistic about how good I was. Not optimistic. I was just out of touch. I was, I thought I was much better than I was. And if I knew how bad I was, I think I would have just given up. But I do the same thing with regard to being able to finish something. like if I think like how long something's really going to take me, it just may feel overwhelming. But I'll take a manuscript, a 400-page manuscript that's just raw first draft,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll actually tell myself that on that flight to New York or Boston, that 5-6 hour flight, I'm going to get through it.
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm going to get through. I might even only get through one chapter, but and then I land and I go, all right, a couple more weeks, maybe a couple weeks, and then a
Yeah.
couple months later, like, oh, I'm almost there. I just have to get a rhythm going. I just keep telling myself I'm just around the corner from being done, even if
There
I'm
you
not.
go.
Just delusional thinking.
So you're just around the corner for editing is like Anne Lamott's like bird by bird type of thing, or 1 inch
Yeah,
picture frame, half-inch picture frame. Like
yeah.
what?
There's no
Yeah.
point. There's no point in overwhelming yourself. I
Uh-huh.
mean, right. A better thing is just to not even think about the whole thing. Just
Sure.
think about what's in front of you.
Sure.
But I get impatient. I'm an impatient person, so I have to delude myself into thinking I'm almost done.
Well, it's the perfect career for impatient people, right? Uh,
Of course, yeah.
I appreciate the reminder. Definitely like kind of the Zen, the go shoot baskets, ride a bike, go running. Like you said, those
Mhm.
ideas will kind of, I know what you mean by mindless. Yeah. The Sandro Malay, do you know that name? He wrote the book called Edgewater Angels.
Sounds familiar.
I mean, I say this with the greatest affection, like a one-hit wonder. He wrote this book called Edgewater Angel, like I said. He's a college basketball player, played for Santa Cruz. He grew up in San Pedro, right, a block
Oh,
away or so from my school.
hmm.
And he wrote this book that's stream of consciousness about, growing up in the rough neighborhood, based on his life. So good. I used to teach it at my school. And I'm sure he wasn't the first one to say it, but I saw an interview with him and I have it quoted in my classroom to this day, writing is thinking.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, like you said, you do most of the thinking, thinking, thinking. The actual writing sure needs to be done, but man,
yeah.
that thinking part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't work, and yeah, and it's exactly when I started writing, it was just about words, getting
Mm-hmm.
words down on paper.
Mm.
I needed to feel like I could accomplish something.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just set a page limit every day. I was going to write like some ridiculous number of pages. I was going to write like 10 to 20 pages a day.
Uh-huh. Of course.
And, and I felt like, well, that's an accomplishment. I mean, they weren't readable pages, but it was something I could
Mm-hmm.
say, look at,
Mm-hmm.
I got this stack of papers. I must have there must be something redeeming.
Right. Right. What you talk about teaching creative writing, what are your students really enjoying? I'm sure you're reading and also what are you enjoying? What are you reading, these days, the last 5-10 years? Like who are some contemporary writers who are really standing out for you and them?
Yeah. Um, well, I read a lot of different things. I read a lot of nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
I just read, I mean, not, it's not brand new, but Brian Stevenson's book,
Oh yeah.
Just Mercy, is a beautiful book.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I love Richard Rousseau.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm still catching up on my Philip Roth.
Okay, yeah.
I read, you know, I read a lot of what I find in the New Yorker, the
Yep.
fiction in the New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my students, what I'm trying to get them to do is just get out of the cliches
Mm.
and figure out something original. The kids often think of stories as being something big.
Mm.
They have to be life and death, or that, or they don't know. I often think, like, often the story is there and you have to find it. It's there somewhere in this mass of, like, I'll give them 10 pictures to describe,
Mm-hmm.
detailed descriptions, and then say, like, find the story in those 10 pictures, and then finding and trying to connect them, they figure out. And that I say, and then remember to you can let go of whatever you want to let go It's your story.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to use any of them, but you have to
Sure.
start with that. But then you got to get to, you got to get to your story.
Sure.
I think it was Oscar Wilde said, "Give a man a mask, and he'll tell you everything about himself."
Hmm.
It's there's we all we all have stories to tell, but how do you unlock them?
Yeah.
That's really the trick.
Oh, very cool. You in recent years wrote a beautiful piece for, I think it was Mother's Day 2019,
Yeah,
about your mom, who I believe had just passed away the year before.
yeah, uh, yeah. 2018, correct.
And my condolences, of course. Your mom was quite a woman, obviously famous in her own right as an actress,
Yeah.
and and also a tribute to your brother as well. What was that like to write such a personal piece?
It was very satisfying, to say it. My my mother was, known. She was. There are two things that I always want to say about her. One was just how hard she worked at
Hmm.
her craft, at her.
Hmm.
People know the one particular character that she played on television for some years, and they think of her as that person, you know,
Mm.
and they go, wow, she's so great. I mean, some people, like, she saved my life. I saw her say something and it saved my life.
Whoa.
And what I want to say is, like, well, that's good. She would appreciate that because, she did work very hard to make that show what it was, but that's not her. She would be
Mm.
the first to say it. That's not her. She didn't
Mm.
always have wise things to say.
Hmm.
She wasn't, that was not her strength, giving advice to people. It never
Mm.
was. She was great at playing that character, but she didn't really want credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
She used to get fan letters. People would ask her problems. She'd have to come to me and ask me, what do I
Mm-hmm.
tell them? Sometimes I had an answer, sometimes I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, but she worked so hard. After she passed away, I found she saved everything. She was a kind of a pack rat, but
Mm.
she a hoarder. But I found, like, piles of scripts of things she'd done, and I started looking through them, and there were notes on every page.
Mm.
She annotated those things to death. Every little beat, every character, every motivation, every thought the character was having.
Hmm.
It was just, she really worked hard. She really wanted to be good, no matter what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And she had wanted to be a serious actress. Like, she wanted to do Medea and,
Mm.
Chekhov. So she wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be the Greeks, and
Sure.
um, but she discovered in college that she was funny. She
Right.
never knew she was funny. Her older sisters just told her she was stupid.
Oh no.
she, she never knew she could make people laugh, and
Uh-huh.
so so she kind of went more in that direction. And then the other thing was just, her and my father, that the way that their persistence about trying to help my brother.
Mm-hmm.
And and you have to understand, he was born in 1955. There was nothing for parents with a
Mm.
special needs child like that. Nothing. I
Mm.
mean, it's bad today. We have we have students at our school who have autism.
Mm-hmm.
Much different, much more high functioning. They're able to go to high school. They're honor students. One of them's at Long Beach State now.
Hmm.
But 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 I know for those parents, it's scary and painful and still lonely, despite everything that's
Sure.
available to them. But for my parents, there was nothing. They were alone. Schools just said, no, he cannot come. He cannot come here. Excuse me. And they had, it was all up to them to, and my mother and my parents, my mother in particular, really helped push for more services, more
Mm-hmm.
resources for kids like that. I
Mm.
have a letter from Mayor Wagner, to my mother about that, thanking her for bringing this to his attention, and
Wow.
listen, she really fought hard for him, but also they just never gave up on him.
Mm-hmm.
They were told when he was little, like, put him in an institution and forget about him.
Mm.
And by the way, Arthur Miller, who I admire, he's one of the great American playwrights. I love his work, and I use his work in school, and but I think one of the great tragedies of his life was that he did just that. He had a son like that, and he institutionalized him, which he was probably told to do, probably encouraged to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and my parents would not do that until they had to. They had to when he was a teenager, but they refused to do that. And it changed my life. It made my house a chaotic, crazy, bizarre experience. And not always easy for me. I mean, I remember having friends over, and my brother would be running through the apartment naked, and with an erection sticking out, and my friends were like, "What the hell is going on in your house?" I mean, it's mortifying to a kid, but in retrospect, it you know it taught me such a valuable lesson about not giving up on anyone. And of course, as a high school teacher in the inner city, there is no better training you could have than what my parents gave me, because I get Father's Day. I used to get cards. Now I just get texts, but I get Father's Day messages every year from men and women I didn't give up on when they were kids. And I have one student, she texts me every day. It says, "Good morning, good day," because I didn't give up on her. And even when she would have given up on herself. And that's not me. That's my parents' influence.
Wow, what beautiful compliments. So the book, which as of today I just found out, the title is shortened to the Light Man. Light Man comes out in November.
Yeah, very beginning of November. Should be available by the mid to late October for pre-orders.
So the book is in first person from Al's point of view. Basically the first chapter, the inciting incident is this is a conniption, as it's called, right? And as Al calls it.
As he calls it, yeah.
As he calls it. And from Davy, and who you said is patterned after your brother, right?
Inspired by.
And it's a chaotic scene, but it's also a beautiful scene where your Al is just like, whoa, what did I just see? Right? Where the father comes out of nowhere. And describe the hat.
Yeah, so Mike, who is the father, Al doesn't know Mike. Al has gone up to Riverside Park to try to escape the Midtown heat. He's supposed to hand out photo processing coupons, and he's got sick of it. Threw him in the gutter, and just went uptown to get a little breeze from the Hudson River. But he sees this. He witnesses this child having a conniption in the park, just like biting himself, pulling his hair, screaming, and everyone's watching and not just looking, like just staring at this disaster. But Mike has made this hat. He's hung this, like, it looks like almost like stained glass, but it's really just a bunch of mirrors on a baseball cap, hung with like a fish line, so that when he puts it on, any light, sunlight, or at night, street light or apartment light, hits the mirrors, and that light around the boy calms him down. He has an affinity for colored light, right, and for looking at colored light, more so than even looking at people. He looks at objects in a very deep and really profound way. And so Mike has made that. Mike is trying to fix his son. He's trying desperately to repair the damage that he doesn't understand that has happened to his son. And he has this hat that he puts on him, and Al just can't believe it. It just blows his mind that a father could, and I don't, it's not something that I say, or even that Al is necessarily conscious of or says, but it's the deficit. It's what Al didn't have.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
Al had a father who was dissatisfied with him, and that's pretty much it. And did things for him, but did a lot of things to him. And
Yes.
what he's watching this, and Al doesn't really know how to be a man in the world, but when he sees this father in the park, and not caring that the world is gawking at him and his son, and he's just focused on helping his son, and he's gone through the trouble to figure out this hat and make this hat. And Al, for Al, that's a man in the world. And he wants to know that, and he wants to understand it, and he wants to know more about this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, you build such, I mean, talk about world building, and obviously it's based on real New York, but it's clearly New York, which I've been to 3 times for a combined 9 days. But it's New York that we know from the 70s. It's the, like you said, pre-gentrification New York. It's the, I mean, Times Square, I don't think it's really mentioned that much, but it's the Times Square New York that was not clean, garbage, trash, darkness, right? I guess, humidity. The sensibility clearly comes through. And why did you decide to place it in 1970, what, 3, 4, 5?
It's interesting. To me, that always felt like the sort of the nadir of that city's despair. I mean, it probably isn't. It's probably later. But I moved from the city in '74, so
Okay.
I mean, I think the famous trash barge. I
Mm,
don't know if you know that story, but
I don't.
there was a barge with trash on it, and no one would take it. It was New York trash, and they couldn't offload it anywhere. I don't think that happened till the '80s. It's funny, in my memory, everything happened while I was there, and then of course New York going bankrupt. I think that was '76. That great headline, Ford to New York, drop dead. The federal government wouldn't bail out New York City. But to me, it's all part of one New York that was that where it just it wasn't safe. It was dirty. The garbage was piling. I remember the garbage strikes and the garbage everywhere. And as a kid, it seems like it's 20 feet high.
Yeah. Oh man. Were you trying to place Al as like an everyman? I mean, I'm at first I'm thinking he's like 19. I'm like, no, of course not. He's older. He's a Vietnam vet. I
Yeah,
mean,
but he was young. He was underage when he went over there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Was kind of purposely making him, like I said, like an everyman? Was he supposed to be representative of something or someone?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Just sort of the lost man, a man who's doesn't have enough, just wasn't given enough to figure it out yet. And really wants to, but experience just hasn't. He's not smart enough to overcome what was done to him, but just by the world. The way we treat each other sometimes.
Sure.
And and I guess I feel like it's such a problem for so many people now, so many men now. I just saw a headline about young men dropping out of college, and the gap between female and male college students has gotten, I think, is an all-time high. That of course the headline is a generation of men are dropping out of college. A little bit of hyperbole, because there are still a lot of young men in college, probably doing well, but it's we have the incels and this whole, it's like the patriarchy is being dismantled, which is good, but a lot of men are having trouble finding their way, navigating that,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, well, how do you how to be a man when it's not set up for you, when it's not, when the path isn't clear. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of sensitivity and insight to do that, and a lot of us aren't given that. We're not prepared for that. We're not prepared to do that.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, maybe not in every man, but certainly a man with a common dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
and and a good man he wants to be good,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't always know how.
Right.
Like when he's, the whole thing with the dog. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he has a conscience about it, but he's like, I got to do it. Like he's too scared to do, what to try to do what's right. It's just too scary.
So that, yeah, that scene seems to be kind of a microcosm of his, like you said, a good heart, but just, I mean, literally ignorant, like doesn't know what to do. And it's kind of like, I mean, is it fair to say that indirectly he hurts the dog, indirectly gets the dog hurt. Dog has to go to the hospital. As you talk about, I mean, in the book, the dog
The vet
is
hospital, yeah.
the vet hospital. Thank you. And so the dog, he steals the dog away because he doesn't have enough money, for
Well,
the
and he doesn't want
overnight.
to. He doesn't want to ask his boss Leon for the money
Sure, sure.
because he's got this paranoia about Leon and Trudy, his girlfriend,
Hmm.
and so all of that stuff, all of his, because he doesn't feel worthy of being loved.
Inferiority complex, right? Exactly. He
Right.
doesn't feel worthy of being loved. Yeah. He can't believe that Trudy's with him. I mean, she's beautiful, so why wouldn't she be with someone else, kind of thing, right?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about her. I mean, her story is a really sad one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Trudy is a victim of abuse, but mostly she's a victim of feeling she didn't protect her sister from it.
Mm.
Didn't believe her sister when she said that she was being abused, and so she's walking wounded, and then
Mm.
uh, in more than one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's in there are layers of her devastation,
Mm-hmm.
and and she's kind of, when he finds her, she's just kind of numb. I mean, all she really cares about is just trying to keep her sister alive somehow in her, in her mind. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she kind of, the dog, her sister's dog, it's like her sister's soul is in that dog, and she's got
Mm-hmm.
to take care of the dog. So,
Mm-hmm.
this guy, she's living with a guy who's beating her up, and but she can't leave because what's going to happen to the dog? She's
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuck there. And and Al finds himself being able to be, to rescue her, and he doesn't even think of himself as being heroic.
Exactly. Yeah.
He just thinks of, but he doesn't, I mean, he doesn't believe there's anything heroic about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's just, he just can't stand to see her like that, and
Mm-hmm.
wants to do that. So but he does, he gives her a place to live, and and then falls in love with her.
Yeah, I mean, the like you said, he doesn't even see himself as a hero. That's before the main action of the book takes place. It's a flashback
Right,
scene.
right, that's a backstory, right?
Right. And but I mean, there's also when I mean, literally pretty much saves Davy from falling out the window of the apartment.
Right,
Right.
he helps Mike, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and right, gets his hand all chewed up doing it.
Yeah. And that incredible scene towards the end, that's, arguably the climactic scene with, where it's just traffic and garbage and all of them out in the middle of the street. I mean, all of them being the two families.
Right.
And I mean, he does some incredible work there to save, multiple people, or at least definitely save, Davy and all that. And he doesn't consider himself to be a hero. Backing up a little bit, so he gets an affinity. I don't know if he called them friends, but him and Mike, who is the
Yeah.
light man, the one you talked about, who built the cool hat,
Right.
and who's very is very selfless and in terms of his son. But also, I hadn't even seen the movie, but part of me is thinking of like, was it Michael Douglas, like Falling Down or Falling Man?
Falling
Like,
Down. Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
like a suburban, like, you know, almost suburban terrorist. Mike has some anger,
yeah.
to say the least, right?
Yes,
And some
it's
of
an
that is
angry man.
right. And doesn't have a union job, so his job is he's an artist with the lights, but he doesn't get to go
Right.
inside the theater.
He's a self-taught light man,
Uh-huh.
theatrical light man. That's how he met Arlene.
Yeah.
But right, the union won't let him work, and
Mm-hmm.
they want him to work his way up from the bottom, and so he's outside running the spotlights in front of the
Mm-hmm.
theater, and just being bitter about it.
Right. And Al feeds into some of that anger, from his boss with some of those conspiracy theories, or maybe not, about about the government, CIA with the
Right,
poison stuff in the
right. I mean,
subway.
Al, right. The way I think about it is, it's like they're good for each other, and they're
Mm.
bad. They're really, really bad for each other,
Yes. Yes.
because they both get to each other, and that's something that unfortunately people do. We're just, I don't know if we're the only animals to do that, that provoke each other to do bad things, as
Right.
well as try to help each other, keep each other from doing bad things. But I mean, in a sense, Mike, because Mike provokes Al, and then Al in turn, not intentionally, not consciously, saying, I'm going to provoke him back,
Mm-hmm.
but it just becomes about, Mike. I mean, Al thinks he's just sort of thinks he's asking a reasonable question, and maybe helping him answer some questions,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but and then of course Leon, Al's boss, sets all of it up with his paranoia.
Sure.
This whole conspiracy thing, which, you know, I don't have to tell you, is rampant, and it's
Yes.
literally epidemic in our culture now.
Yes.
um and for good reason. I mean, there are people who write about this, write very eloquently about how it came to be. I mean,
Mm.
conspiratorial thinking has always been around, but it's become legitimized in part because of things that actually did happen.
Mm.
Because there really are things like, the opioid crisis
Mm.
is a conspiracy of drug manufacturers,
No doubt.
to get people addicted. The cigarette industry, what the cigarette industry did to
Mm-hmm.
addict people. There really is, the bombing of Cambodia, the Pentagon, like there
Yes.
really are things that go on. And so, it's easy. So it's easy when you're alienated, when you're, disenchanted, when it feels like the world's against you, like everything's stacked against you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to fall into that.
Mm.
And that's what these two men. That's what happens to these two men, particularly Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Mike is not only, he feels, he feels slighted by the world, but but in particular, because of his son and his own frustration that
Right.
he can't help his son.
Right.
There's nothing worse than, when your child is suffering and you can't do anything about it. It's the
Yes.
worst feeling in the world, or anyone you love,
Sure.
but maybe nothing more, maybe no one more than your own child.
Right.
And so he is ripe for believing that, the CIA releasing chemicals in the subway is the reason his son is the way he is, and that he needs to lash out at them.
Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the book, towards the end, Trudy starts to. So Arlene, the wife of Mike, becomes the Roach Lady on TV. She becomes,
Right.
kind of omnipresent on commercials and
Folk,
such. And
New York folk
yeah,
hero.
exactly, right.
Everybody's all the filth and misery of New York at that time.
Uh-huh.
This becomes embodied in
Yes.
the roaches on that commercial, and her swinging a broom at them and just not taking it, just lashing out.
Yeah.
And sadly, I mean, she answers a cattle call audition,
Mm-hmm.
gets it because she basically channels her own frustration
Mm-hmm.
and her ambivalence about her own children
Mm.
who've taken her away from what she's passionate about her career and her art. And she so she knows, and Mike knows, and even Al knows, because Mike tells him that when she's yelling at those roaches,
Mm-hmm.
she's really yelling at her kids,
Right.
probably him too.
Right.
That frustration, that anger. And and she becomes this folk hero, which also is a, it's great. They're able to move to the east side. They're able to move to a better apartment because
Mm.
they get a nice check. But it's also a curse.
Mm-hmm.
It's a curse because people, you're no longer human to these people.
Right.
You are by the way, I remember as a little kid seeing a guy, I'm sure to you it's just something you've seen on film, the British rock invasion, and
Mm-hmm.
and how young women reacted to like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the violence of it, which I mean, I haven't really studied it, but I'm guessing it's related to sexual repression, and
Mm.
in some way, like that whole idea of like the fighting, the ambivalence,
Mm-hmm.
that what they feel is contradictory to how they're supposed to feel, and how they.
Mm.
But anyway, I remember seeing a young man with long hair, like a mop top, and I don't know if I don't think he was a musician, but he looked like he was in a British rock band. I
Mm-hmm.
remember seeing him getting attacked on the street by
Oh,
girls,
jeez.
like violently. Like he looked terrified,
Uh-huh.
and they were like ripping his clothes. I still remember that image,
Wow.
and then of course, I've had my own experiences just with, when my mother was famous.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, some of it's nice, but some of it's kind of horrifying.
I bet.
The intrusion, the just the entitlement that we all have towards towards these people. They belong to us.
Oh yeah.
My son went to school with Shaquille O'Neal's son, and when they were playing for the state championship, not my son, but the team, we went to some games, and Shaq was there sitting in the front row, and you pass by him, and there is an impulse. I mean, I resisted it, but there's an impulse to talk to him and demand that he talk to you. Like, I know you, Shaq. I watch you on Inside the NBA. I mean, you're my friend, aren't you?
Yes.
And I mean, of course, it's easy for me to be sensitive to that because I've been on the other side of that.
Sure.
I remember sitting when my brother was much older, sitting in a Sizzler with him. We used to take him out to dinner, and my brother could eat. My brother was a voracious eater. I mean, he would pile salad on a plate 2 feet high with blue cheese dressing on it. He was just inhale it, and and I'm a pretty voracious eater myself. And I remember we're sitting there with my mom at this restaurant, and just like shoveling food, and she's like trying to have a conversation with my brother, and get him like, okay, slow down, like, slow down. And these girls come up, and hi, and they want autographs and all this, and my mother just, she's like, well, here we are, like, this is me, this is not it's not Mrs. Garrett, this is me. These are, this is my son, and he, and and she said that. She said, these are my son. This is, and my brother turns from his plate with like blue cheese dressing dripping down his chin, and he just like, hi. He just gives this like praise word, hi. And I couldn't resist it. You know what I did? Of course.
No.
I turned from my plate and I said, Hi.
Yes. Yes.
Let them know, like,
Yes.
which one now, which one is one
Okay.
is
Okay.
autistic. Um,
Oh boy.
but but and my mother was used to it, and she handled it with grace.
Sure.
She was never rude to anybody. But I know,
Sure.
she would sort of go, tense up, like, okay, now I have to be on.
Yeah.
And you know so it's so anyway, that scene has that, like, just when they're trying to save their son,
Mm-hmm.
who's literally going to kill himself in the street because he's
Mm-hmm.
afraid of garbage trucks.
Mm-hmm.
um the final obstruction is the people who love her,
Right.
who love the Roach Lady,
They're
because
they're
she's
they're
not
literal
hurting.
obstruction. They're literal obstruction, right? They're literally not letting
Yeah.
her. Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're not going to let her. And they're New Yorkers. Like, they're not. You're gonna have to fight them off.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I guess I don't know if the story's apocryphal or not, but like I can't bring I can't bring myself to watch I guess it's the first Batman or the first of the newer ones. Is they say that when you're talking about like Arlene getting so much into that Roach commercial, like channeling all the repressed, is with Heath Ledger. Is they say he was, I don't know, suicidal or very depressed, right? And he obviously did that incredible job with the Joker,
Mm,
like scarily so, you know what I mean? And I can't bring myself to watch that again because it's like I feel like you're watching him, suffer. You're
right,
watching him.
right. You're watching his
Yeah.
art is his pain,
Yes.
and it's and it's. I mean, that's fine. Like, we know that when we hear Billie Holiday sing, when we hear
Hmm.
Miles Davis play the trumpet, we
Hmm.
we know that the pain is they're able to do something with it. They're able to
Hmm.
make beautiful art with it.
Hmm.
Right. But it's hard when that pain was never
Right.
solved, or that the solution was a tragic one.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering about the connection or what pull what pull that Arlene had for Trudy. Trudy, when she first found out, like, hey, Al says, hey, my friend Mike, his wife is the Roach Lady, and Trudy was like quiet but interested, like, whoa, and she wanted to meet her. And then when she did meet her, it was that chaotic scene. But what was it about Trudy that was it that Trudy wanted to be her or be? How would you describe that?
Wait, the pull for who?
I
For
The pull. What was it about Trudy that drew Arlene?
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
other way
I
around.
think
I'm sorry. Other way around. What was it about Arlene that Trudy was like,
yeah.
oh, right?
Right, right, right. Oh, that's a good question. I think it's that she's able to express
Mm,
what for most of the fans on the street, it was that Arlene was expressing the anger and frustration
mm-hmm,
that they felt for the filth. The roaches were
mm-hmm.
everything. They
Sure.
were the dirty subways that stop in the middle of the tunnel, and they were the garbage everywhere. They were the crowdedness, the
Mm-hmm.
everything, everything that was unlivable about the city at that time.
Sure.
The noise, everything. And so for them, it was like, she's not taking it. She's a survivor. She's gonna
Mm,
fight back. For Trudy, though, it is something else. It's Trudy sees her pain. Trudy sees her working through her pain, and it gives her a sense of hope
mm-hmm,
for herself, that she's not just quietly suffering.
mm.
And she connects in a different way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to give away the ending. Those listening, this is such a good book, so interesting. I want to say, like, period piece, which makes me think of
Yeah,
like,
it's a bit
right?
period.
Makes me
Yeah.
think of like 1800 England, but it
Yeah.
is, right?
It is
And
now, yeah.
but I do want to say, the ending in many ways is incredibly dark, incredibly, incredibly dark. But Al does have that. There is a ray of hope for sure in the end,
Mm.
having to deal with some of his last interactions with Trudy in the book and such. Um, when I know, of course, with all the editing, that there was no really last time that you wrote the last word. It wasn't like you wrote the book, I'm done.
Right.
But was there like a sense of like, whoo, like catharsis? Like, damn, this was a dark ending with a little bit of hope. Like, how would that feel to like Fiend? The end.
Yeah, I remember feeling very uplifted at a certain point. I don't know if it was the very end
Mm-hmm.
or if it was more about Al. Al is able to feel like he's done something good
Yes.
in the world.
Yes.
But what he does, I mean, not just, I'm going to talk around giving it away, not
Mm-hmm.
just what he does in the moment, but what he does afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
because now he now he feels like he's part of that family.
Yeah.
He's the reason Mike is there with his son.
Right.
He is the reason Mike is there with his son, and he can live with himself now. He feels like he's made a contribution, like he's done something,
Mm-hmm.
and that he's part of this, and he feels that he's in a way it's a weird rite of passage, which I
Yeah.
love. I love
Yes.
weird rites of passage.
Yeah.
Kind of, traditional rites of passage are interesting. They're important to recognize, but they're, but for me as a writer, they don't move me.
Sure.
The strange ones, the ones we have to discover, the the rites of passage and redemptions, the unexpected redemptions
Mm-hmm.
are definitely the most interesting.
Well, so cool. I got to see the cover that you showed me just a while ago, and excited for November. If you're up for it, it's totally up to you. If you wanted to, I don't know if you wanted to read an excerpt or so
Sure.
from the book.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Well, since we talked about it, since you mentioned that that opening chapter,
Mm-hmm.
that scene where Al first sees the cat,
Right.
you can certainly read that one.
Very cool.
It's my turn for ice cream, but I can't take my eyes off the man and the two boys. Neither can the rest of the crowd. We're all standing around taking it in. I think because seeing someone worse off, or who you think is worse off, it helps get to the end of the day. It's something to sleep on, especially in heat like this. Nobody steps over and says, "What can I do?" or anything. But what could any of us really do for a kid having a conniption? Nothing I know of. I used to have conniptions. I'd get so mad sometimes I couldn't see right in front of me and just wanted to kill everyone. All anyone ever did was beat the hell out of me or try to make me stop. And that doesn't really work. I'm sorry, to try to make me stop. And that doesn't really work. Except one time it worked when my brother Rusty knocked me the hell out with a leg from a broken chair. But this is different. The man's got something in the bag. What he's got is a baseball cap with a red B for Boston Red Sox on the front. That cap is all rigged with colored plastic, like stained glass hanging down from the bill and mirrors stuck together with paper clips or something. I don't know how in the hell all that stuff stays together, but it does, even when the smaller boy drops it on the ground while he's handing it to the father. The bigger boy keeps thrashing around while they try to get the thing on his head, screaming so loud I swear they can hear it in Jersey. But then they get the thing on his head, this weird hat. It looks like something a crazy man would wear on the subway. In the small pieces of mirror, you can see colored light, little rainbows like the colors of a dream you never had but wish you could. I've never seen it like that. I'm sorry. I've seen it like that one time when I looked inside a gimmick they sell at Lamston's, what they call a kaleidoscope. It works. You can't see the boy's face, but his body, you can see it relax. At this point, just about everyone in the park is watching. Even the ice cream man is watching. Like maybe We just saw the secret to how the human race could calm hate and stop murder, end the war in Vietnam and every other stupid war, and get people to stop bashing each other over the head and cutting each other and everything else. The way that kid gets suddenly calm, makes it seem like anything could be possible. I turn away though. I don't want to see anymore. I've seen it, and now I just want my ice cream and the breeze on my face and forget what I've seen and forget my whole stupid life. It's a lot to ask from an ice cream cone with nuts and chocolate. I pay my 2 bits and unwrap the cone, and I don't look back at the man or his 2 sons, but I don't know how to forget them. I don't know how to stop wanting to meet the guy and talk to him about that hat and how he thought it up and how he made it.
The book is going to be a hard one to forget, as you talk about there. There's a lot to think about. It's definitely stuck with me. A lot of things that I recognize in the book, a lot of things I didn't. And it's one of those, especially as a fairly new father with a 5 and a 3-year-old, I think about a lot. Appreciate you reading from that. Appreciate you sharing.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being on here. It's been a pleasure. You know, we used to talk zone defense and press and all that, and now we're talking writing. Congrats on the book. It's an awesome achievement. I'm gonna, promote it as much as I can in my little corner
Thank
of the
you.
world.
Appreciate it.
And continued great luck in the future. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode 83 with Larry Strauss. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa. Find it on Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1, the number 1. You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube through the Chills at Will Podcast, Chills at Will YouTube channel. Please subscribe while you're there. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down Instrumental, and the other song played on the episode is Hoops by Matt Whitehour. Both songs are used through archesaudio.com. I'm excited to share my next episode with Noah Hurwitz, a journalist based in New York City, speaking of. He covered the trial of El Chapo for Rolling Stone, and his first book, El Chapo, The Untold Story of the World's Most Infamous Drug Lord, was published in July. The episode will air on October 9th. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with mad skills like Larry Strauss, whose work gives you chills at